Hello, welcome. I'm Bron Brady, and this is the Teach Starter webinar series. We are very pleased to be highlighting the work of Know Your Country today, an advocacy campaign which is calling for all federal, state, and territory education ministers and shadow ministers by their next election to commit funding for all primary schools to employ locally approved First Nations cultural educators. Today, we're going to find out about some of the wonderful benefits for Aussie kids of having a cultural educator in their school. I'm joined by Know Your Country ambassadors, Auntie Phyllis Marsh, Mamu woman and cultural educator at Westmoreton Anglican College, and also Dr. Scott Winch, Wiradjuri man and First Nations senior policy advisor at World Vision. I'm going to go to you first, Auntie Phyllis, to share your experiences on the ground within your school, linking our national curriculum to classroom settings, developing your own education program for your school, and how you support teachers and students in embedding First Nations perspectives in classrooms. So welcome, Auntie Phyllis. Thank you so much for being here on Teach Starter.
Thank you, Bron. I'm very pleased to be here, and I acknowledge the elders of the countries of the First Nation people who we're both on at the moment. You're down in Sydney.
No, we're in Brisbane, actually.
Oh, in
Yep.
Brisbane. So we're
Yeah.
all on Yagara Turrbal country. So
Yeah.
very pleased to be here and
Thank
share some of the
you.
knowledge that I've gained.
Thank you so much for doing that acknowledgement for us as well. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Um, we've got lots of questions for you today, so I'm going to jump straight on into them because I'm really interested to find out, and I'm sure a lot of our teachers are too, about you yourself and what you do within your school and how that is
Yes.
helping students who are both First Nations students and non-Indigenous students as well. So
Yeah.
Annie Phyllis, you have a long history of work in education and curriculum development. Such an impressive LinkedIn profile I stalked earlier.
Oh,
How did you find yourself in this current role as learning innovator for Indigenous perspectives at your school?
the decision to step into this role was based purely on the fact that I only have the one son and we live off country. So, my country being Mamu is up in North Queensland. So, being based in Brisbane, it really was about the community I was engaging with. And the school my son had done primary or junior level at did have a liaison officer there, but it was a real removal or in how he was being taken out of class. There wasn't true education in helping him learn in the classroom with his peers. So, stepping down from a role as a national manager of a private RTO, in having gained the employment opportunity here at Westmoreton Anglican College, um, which we had already selected this school as being the school we would take that journey on further education and leadership with our son, and
Yep.
then they advertised this role. Um, and it seemed to me like a no-brainer. For me, I wanted to be responsible in ensuring that my son's education journey here at Westmoreton Anglican College was beneficial in how he was educated in his ancient culture. And I thought, well, if not me, then who? And so I put my hand up and I was. I've been here for about 3 years now, and I can say it's a happy partnership at the moment. So yeah, I'm really enjoying working here, and how we've been working within this space of cultural education. Um, and the programs that we've developed to blend seamlessly and through all the three sub schools, as well as how we work with the staff.
Fantastic. Oh, well, it sounds like this role was meant to be, and that you're definitely making such a great impact on your students' lives and their perspectives as well. So, what does a day in your role look like, Auntie Phyllis? And are 2 days ever the same?
No. So my role is full time within Westmac, and every day is different. And that is due to the response that I have from working within the three sub schools. So, I mean, I'm called to a classroom that may be kindy, or going in and working with our senior students all the way up into year 11 and 12. So, the response from the teachers. is different into what they're seeking to how they embed Indigenous perspectives. Um, so, with the teachers, we're currently working within that current curriculum. And for some, that looks like it's a direct response from the elaborations. And for others, it's innovating on the content description. What we have been doing this year, some teachers are seeking to integrate the units together. So we come up with a theme, and let's just say, like, it's connectedness. And in that theme, we look at the learning areas within the curriculum and see how we can combine them and have this whole theme of connectedness running through an integrated unit.
That's
It's
fantastic.
and that's really that's very exciting. It's very innovative in how the teachers are working, and at Westmac we call this Dundiri curriculum, which is coming together curriculum.
That is perfect. What a great
Yeah,
name. That is excellent.
yeah,
And that's really what the national curriculum requires of us as teachers. So it's great to see you guys trailblazing in this way and giving us an amazing working example of how this can be replicated in every Australian school.
yeah.
And you've also seen from doing this firsthand such benefits and such a great shared understanding between First Nations people and non First Nations children,
Yes.
and how that can have a really deep and lasting impact on them through their education journey and beyond. What are some of the learning outcomes for non First Nations students in having someone like you work within their school?
So the benefit is that the way we work, which is the Dundiri program, which covers every action that we do, and how I've created it or designed it to help it work seamlessly, is there are three learning outcomes that we work for or form the basis in where we teach from. And here at Westmac, we ask the teachers to teach from a knowing and acknowledging that in this country, we have the oldest surviving practicing continuous culture in the world. So we work from that basis. Um, and at Westmac, we seek to have all students connect to these three learning outcomes, which are built into our three themes, and which every learning area in the curriculum is streamed through. So these three themes are caring for country, connection to country, and wisdom of country. So how I designed that was that no matter which area of learning in the curriculum, depending on whether it's science, maths, geography, English, citizenship, it all streams through one of those three learning outcomes. So, what does caring for country look like when we're speaking about it in an Indigenous perspective?
Yeah, it sounds like you're
Yeah,
doing such an amazing job with the curriculum development
yeah,
and delving into teasing out all of the KLAs and making sure that you've got all bases covered through that lens of embedding First Nations perspectives into all areas of the curriculum. It's really great that you have been able to do that, and also well done. Like that would have been
yeah.
a big task over
It's
3
taken a
years.
few years to sort of we wanted to work with it holistically and organically.
Yeah.
So we wanted to be subtle movement through. We weren't just changing the curriculum; we were changing teaching practice.
Hmm.
We were changing the way it looks in the classroom, so that it wasn't. There weren't these little iconic cultural corners
Hmm.
that it was sprinkled everywhere with throughout the curriculum, and that a child could walk into a classroom and say, I see me here, I hear me here. Um, and so the best way I wanted to do that was in educating our workforce
Hmm.
in using those three themes. Because and listening and speaking with them, this is what was coming out in conversations, and so consequently, that's how these Dundiri was created, and these three themes on how we stream through the curriculum
Yeah.
was designed.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's amazing, and it's just that kind of feedback and reflection cycle that as educators, we're really used to doing, and it sounds like
Yes.
you've really used the teacher's need to inform you of how to create this, I guess, pedagogy for them to use.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
when you were talking to the teachers about this at the beginning of your journey, maybe, and throughout, what were the teachers' biggest obstacles when attempting or trying to embed First Nations perspectives, and how can other teachers who don't have their own cultural educator at the moment overcome those obstacles in order to effectively teach this really essential piece of the
Yeah.
curriculum?
Look, the biggest gap that I saw when I first started was the competency
Hmm.
of the staff.
Yeah.
So, if there was the biggest obstacle, I would have to say, working within the largest educational workforce in this country,
Hmm.
we have close to 300,000 teachers or registered teachers on the in the database, and not all of them, if not the majority, were feeling culturally incompetent
Mm.
or didn't have significant cultural competency training.
Hmm.
And I'm not talking about a 1 hour workshop. I'm talking about how it's embedded through the HR program
Hmm.
within a school,
Yeah.
or how it's embedded through the curriculum. Because ultimately, what we are responsible for are these little children who have such an impacted story on throughout their generation. We needed to create a cultural safe space for them. So they needed to know that they were culturally safe because the educator or teachers or the workforce that were around them was culturally competent
Hmm.
to be um, in that space with them
Hmm.
and how they were taught. Um, because for us, what that looks like, how I identified how that looked was that it came out like through a paralysis analysis. Like there was this a fear of offending, fear of not doing it right, fear of not knowing where to look, or sometimes even a fear of, they became so overwhelmed by reading all this material,
Mm.
instead of just coming back to and contextualizing it within their local knowledge. Um, not knowing how to approach the community. And so a lot of these things, we've designed in the throughout the past, liaison officers or community education counselors,
Yeah.
um, but how a cultural educator makes a difference is that they're actually working in the classroom.
Yeah.
They were building relationship and trust with the workforce, as well as being able to be responsive back to the community and telling them, look, this is what it looks like in the classroom. This is what we're doing. And this is how we're being responsible for the cultural safety of your children.
Absolutely. And that's the key thing, isn't it? To make sure that the
Yeah.
students feel comfortable, belonging, and confident in their educators, that the teachers actually feel competent, and that will continue to help bring that confidence to the children in the class as well. So
Yeah.
that's really great. And the cultural safety element of it, what does a culturally safe classroom look like?
A culturally safe classroom looks like any child, no matter their how they identify, or where they're from, they're able to walk into their learning space, because that's what we're creating for each and every child who comes into that classroom. This is their space where they come to learn.
Hmm.
And what we don't want to see happen is still having this historical Eurocentric colonization view that in how we design our classroom, that it is so has no semblance of reflecting who or the students that are in that classroom. And what I mean by that is, not just pulling out books when it's NAIDOC, but having the authentic voices or books written about country
Hmm.
being accessible all year round, um, in their home corner or in their artwork or their design, just embedding it that it's something that they do every day, so that that Indigenous student sitting in that classroom knows that who they are is something that they can be every day,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. Yeah, it's not just I get to celebrate me only on certain occasions,
Hmm.
but we are celebrating our identity each and every day.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and they can't, and that they're walking strong and culturally proud. And having a cultural educator come into the classroom and teach this ancient knowledge, that is something, or one way where we're making it culturally safe for a future generation.
Amazing. Yes,
Yeah.
that's so special and sacred and important. And we know there's a lot of evidence that suggests that children who feel a sense of belonging and connectedness with their peers and their educator, their learning outcomes are much more favourable to those children.
Yes.
So we want to
Yeah.
make sure that the children all have that and do come to that safe space every day to do their best learning. So it's amazing
Absolutely.
that.
It's imperative. It's vital. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So when we're talking about, and obviously these students have a lot of trust with you. You're someone who's familiar to everybody in the school, and you're obviously such a important part of the school community. And you teach kids, like you said, from kindy to grade 12. So that's a lot of learning differentiation as well. And I'd
Yeah.
imagine there's a lot of different sort of topics and um, yeah, cultural lessons and learnings that you bring to each age group. But what sort of questions do the students bring to you, or what's their favorite thing to do with you? Do you have like a practice or a routine or a ritual of any way that you love doing with all of your students?
Yeah, so the children love the wonder of life and knowledge. They love learning, especially in our younger years, where it's still seen to them to be fun and nothing, the pressure of writing an assignment.
Yeah.
Um, they love how people do things, and they love learning the why. So, a lot of the questioning I get from students, especially the littlies, is why? Why did Aboriginal people dance a lot? Why did they make up stories about the sky? Um, and what I can proudly say here at Westmac, what we don't hear from the students is were questions. Were the Aboriginal people there? Because there is this sense of knowing
Mhm,
in the deliberate approach we've taken that this is still an existing culture
mhm,
that is still practiced, and they get to see that by having interaction with myself.
mhm,
That we work from the premise that teachers teach about culture, and I come in and I teach it. um, and the feedback I've heard from certainly the senior students is that there is this knowing and this confidence that I bring when I'm in there to speak about cultural education,
mhm.
and I'm blown away by it. It excites me, and and I'm impassioned by sharing that knowledge. The most favorite thing that they love to do, I mean, especially with the little ones, of course, is dance.
Yeah.
They love, so in how I was taught by my parents, in going and sitting and observing
Mhm.
and then mimicking. So we do that. We go down to our pond, we watch birds and the animals that come to the pond and the waterway, and then we mimic. So we break into groups, and I give them and I charge them with specific birds that they might need to watch,
Yeah,
and then they bring that story alive through their dance. And they, of course, like anybody, all the research that's gone into it, they love hearing the stories,
mhm,
and they love hearing stories that are not um, oh, this has happened, but they love hearing stories that are connected to this country,
mhm.
or to myself. Um, yeah, these are the things that I'm seeing and measuring and monitoring and responding to, so I know how to design the programs that I do with the children.
Yeah,
One of the best programs that we just did was the Westmac Eco Explorer. So we're wanting to get the kids out onto country
yep,
and observe and watch and learn language. And so I created this little booklet for them,
yep.
and if they completed it and returned it, they received a certificate and a little badge. And we made sure we handed them out over the junior school assembly, so they were receiving
Oh,
the certificate
so
of
special.
knowledge, or what we call Balgari, which is learning. So yeah, it's these are the things that we're or I'm seeing that the children are really enjoying.
Oh, it's so great to hear about some of the things that you're able to do with your students, and how
Yeah.
you're just enriching their lives so much. Because, as you said before, these are our citizens of tomorrow. These are people who need to be equipped with our cultural knowledge and an understanding of who what it means to be an Australian, and be part of our landscape and our country and our life. So
Yeah.
it's so great
Absolutely.
to capture that inquisitive nature of the little ones and then take it all
Yeah.
the way through. So great to have. They're so lucky to have a resource like you, an actual, like, I think that a lot of the time, like you said, it's not just about learning about the culture, it's about learning the culture. And you've got
Yes.
so much knowledge and experience yourself that's so invaluable to those kids, hearing such personal stories and things about your experience and your heritage. Really just brings it so much closer to them as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, what a cultural educator will do for your child, Bron, is take them on a journey that'll lead them down a path to another world that currently exists in their reality. So if I just show them the lens of which I can see the world and how we see it in layers, how we can connect to the stories in the sky, and have that as a result of what's happening in the sky is reflected here on Earth, and the seasons, and not just make it an ancient thing,
Hmm.
but it's the eyes or the lens that I see and look through every day. Taking them out and asking them to connect and learn about, you know, what's on their country and the importance of how they connect to it. Um, and it's not far, far away or once upon a time. It's today. And what I get to see is, when that little mind, when a child's mind lights up
Yeah.
and you've hit something that engages with them. When I utter the words, hey, did you know? And they just like, what? No, tell me, So um, I, I get that joy from them. I get to see that and to watch them move and feel this. They feel that empathy and that sense of, why aren't we learning this more, especially in the older grades. you know Based on me being here, the senior students created a committee, um, to ensure that they learn more and that they can do more.
Mm.
So they're educating themselves on social justice, on watching programs and TV documentaries, and then where we all meet up then to discuss. This is what. So they're not. I'm not bringing this to them. They're going and seeking it out, and then seeking me as somebody who they can come to and talk or have a yarn about it.
Yeah.
So that's you you design it, you're here, but it's how you build that relationship and connections, is the result, the happy result. And I think that's why it's been so successful, in how we've done it here at Westmoreton Anglican College. And that's why it's so important, that we have cultural educators, because it really literally will change, how we do things in this country.
Yes, I honestly believe that too. And I
Yeah.
think that you guys are a great blueprint or a great example of what can be done, and the potential that can be realized from little children to adolescent kids who are, like you said, finding their voice, becoming advocates, having, you know, um, passionate impact on the world, in so many different spheres, like you said, with their social justice endeavors and stuff like that. And it's so lovely to have another trusted adult in the school that brings this perspective and shares it with them. So,
Yes.
Annie, Phyllis, it's really important that we let our teachers know how they can support Know Your Country in achieving the goal of having the government funding to get
Yeah.
these paid cultural educators in every Australian school, which is their ultimate goal.
Yes.
So, what can teachers do? How can we step up and help out this amazing advocacy program that Know Your Country is running?
Sign the petition.
Yep.
So Google Know Your Country, and then click onto knowyourcountry.com. And on the very first page, so once you click onto that, it'll take you to the page, and you may need to scroll down a little bit, but the petitions easy and readily available for you. Fill that in,
Mhm.
submit it, and become part of the ambassador group
Yep.
that's letting the government know that this is important and this is what we want for our future generation.
Yep. So, teachers, I'm going to also link that petition in the show notes. It's a really easy, effective way to have your voice heard and tell other teachers in your school about it too. Tell your admins. Make sure we make some noise about this and get this happening in Australian schools because it's really valuable and amazingly important. It blows my mind how important this is and how lacking we are in this area. So,
Yeah.
thank you so much for joining me, Auntie Phyllis.
Thanks, Veron.
Yeah, it's been lovely chatting with you and
So
hearing about
honoured.
the amazing work you're doing. So you're lucky students. We want that for every student.
Thank you so much. You're very kind, but I love it. I love what we're doing.
Yeah, thank you for all
Thank
your
you.
passion for education too, because I can tell that you absolutely love what you do and the changes that you're making in your students' lives and the impact. So thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Okay, we'll now go to Dr. Scott Winch, Senior Policy Advisor at World Vision, to hear more about the process of developing the campaign, how it's going, what a culturally safe learning environment looks like, and how teachers can act to support the Know Your Country campaign. Welcome, Scott.
Thanks, Bronwyn.
Scott, your colleague Adam Valvasori described you as the brains behind Know Your Country in a recent LinkedIn post I read. You have an incredible academic background that you've brought to this role. Tell us a little bit about your history and what brought you to work in advocacy as a policy advisor at World Vision, please.
Yeah, very kind words from Adam. I guess my background academically is that I did a PhD looking at the impact of school engagement on Aboriginal primary school children and how that relates to educational outcomes. So a bit of statistical modelling just to kind of demonstrate something common sense really around, the more engaged our kids are, the better they perform academically. But that also has a lot to do with cultural safety and culturally um, appropriate learning environments as well. I guess my background as well has been is Indigenous health for a couple of decades. Worked in different spaces there in academia and policy and programs. Working with World Vision, I really appreciate the opportunity to work in a space which is child rights and development focused. Really have a contribution, hopefully, for our children, our next generation, to be able to thrive to their sort of best potential.
Right, yeah. And we heard from Auntie Phyllis just before how important it is to engage First Nations students in the classroom from a teacher's perspective as well, and from a cultural educator's perspective. And that's the whole idea of Know Your Country, is to try and have some government funding to be able to have a First Nations cultural educator in all of our primary schools. But we're also talking about the benefits of having a cultural educator for non-Indigenous children. So for whole school communities, the benefits are really rich. And she was really great in explaining on a school-based level what they are. But could you tell us in your within your research and the scope of that, what are the keys to engaging Aboriginal students in the classroom?
Yeah, so for engaging Aboriginal students, it's important to have culturally safe learning environments. It's important to have our culture, history, and perspectives reflected in the curriculum. Peer engagement is extremely important as well. So feeling included in the school environment with their friends and peers is extremely important for our children to feel very engaged. So there's some of the internal things. Teachers make a difference. School leadership makes a difference. That's just inside the school. And then there's the broader societal issues which impact on our children's ability to thrive in education.
Sure, yeah. And now, so this is going back a little bit of time now, but when you think about your own schooling, are there memories or experiences that you have from the Australian education system which influenced you to campaign for more meaningful and authentic education about First Nations people and culture?
Oh yeah, look, sure. As an Aboriginal person growing up, going to school in the '80s, um, we're far less progressive society back then, so I caught my fair share of racism by teachers, by my friends and schoolmates, and so did my brothers and sisters. So I get it. Like, I get how the education system can be marginalising for our children. I mean, for me, I had my own challenges, but my brother and sister, they left in year 9 because they just really didn't fit into the education system. So, it's important to have culturally safe learning environments, and that's what we're really hoping to achieve through this campaign, or one of the main aims.
Right, yes. And do you feel like since the 80s, do you feel like we have progressed into that direction? Auntie Phyllis gave us some insight into what culturally safe environments, learning environments look like and feel like, and how the children feel when they're being engaged and feel safe. Um, do you see this happening? Is this a progression since then? I'm really hoping so, and I feel that at this stage with embedding Indigenous First Nations perspectives into the cross-curriculum priorities, teachers are much more aware and more culturally sensitive themselves. And I'm sorry to hear that you had such bad experience with educators, much less other children. But yeah, how do you think we're going? What's your gauge on this in 2021?
Yeah, absolutely. There's been some really positive advances, and as society uh, in a whole, we've sort of really moved towards being more inclusive for our people, and understanding the importance, and also appreciating what we can contribute to modern Australian society. So I think it's come a long way, and I think stuff like the ACARA framework, which is the National Curriculum Framework, has been, very instrumental in providing curriculum frameworks for teachers. The IATSL teacher standards are also an important framework for developing culturally capable teachers to be able to deliver curriculum. Universities are much more equipped with subjects specifically around First Nations education. So there has been a lot of great movements over the years, and a lot of this has been led by First Nations communities, peak Aboriginal education bodies. So we really, following in the footsteps of some really strong leaders and organisations. But with that, yeah, but yeah, there still is a way to go.
And that's important to remember. I think that's it's great to see, to reflect and think that we have progressed, and that we have sort of developed, as you said, like a different modern Australia than you and probably many of your peers experienced years ago. But I guess one of the wonderful things about the education profession and the gifts that teachers have is the ability to enact change through their students and to give them insights and appreciation for culture, appreciation for history, and have that flow through the community as a beginning point in schools. So with the campaign, as I said before, and Auntie Phyllis was talking about it too, that we're talking about today, Know Your Country, it's calling for funding for First Nations cultural educators like Auntie Phyllis in schools. Um, why is it so important at this point we've got a lot going on in the world at the moment, but this is something that we feel very strongly is important. Can you tell our listeners why it's so important to protect First Nations culture and history as a priority, and why it's in the curriculum as a priority?
Yeah, well, I guess it is a recognition of there's a number of things, so that we have a right to have our culture and our language and perspectives reflected in the education system. Um, it really is also a gift for all Australian children to be able to learn from our culture and history, and to truly engage in their local environment, where they go to school, where they're growing up, to really know and connect with their country. So there's been some great advances. So, like we mentioned, the ACARA framework, the IATSL. But what we find also is that teachers still lack some knowledge and skills in these spaces, and the confidence. And so it's, a lot of teachers don't want to do the wrong thing and don't want to be disrespectful, so don't really engage in the space, which is understandable. And so what we're saying, we're not trying to call teachers out on this. We're trying to call them in and say we can hopefully can be a resource for you to equip you with local connections, local knowledges to support you to develop the curriculum in partnership with local Aboriginal people. So it really does strengthen that. And we believe that's a real gap at the moment, that connection between the education system and local communities. And it does provide self-determination in the education system for our communities. So it enables authentic, locally based cultural education to be delivered in the schools.
Yeah, certainly. And I think that a lot of our listeners who are teachers will resonate with that feeling of being a bit uncertain or unsure about how to approach their responsibility under ACARA to embed First Nations perspectives, histories and cultures. And this is really an opportunity for them to access the experts, really, people in our community who have the knowledge and have the historical and cultural understandings and backgrounds to deliver that learning and to support the teachers, not only the students, but also to support the teachers in their curriculum delivery as well. So I think this is something that is so needed at the moment. And so if teachers and teacher aides and school staff, principals, parents work together and can communicate our need for teaching and learning support from a First Nations teacher in order to effectively embed the curriculum, how can they go about approaching this? I believe there's a petition they can sign on Know Your Country. How do you suggest teachers go about approaching their principal and getting the support behind them?
Yeah, so I think it really is an opportunity for schools to be enriched with this resource. So it would actually provide an additional resource to schools, to teachers. So teachers can go and to sign up on our webpage, knowyourcountry.com.au. And also schools can join up. So, to have a conversation with your principals and your school leaders, and I guess just make them aware of what we're trying to do. We're just trying to actually enhance the education system to enrich it, so it is more effective in delivering more efficiently as well. It's an efficient way of doing it if it's funded properly. To be able to deliver this, we know teachers are extremely overloaded with work. They've got a lot to do, so it can really support them to be able to what they need to do in terms of delivering the ACARA cross curriculum framework.
Exactly. Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Scott. Teachers, get onto that. Go visit Know Your Country. There's a lot of resources there for you to be able to access to get started. And then, make sure that you action this and sign that petition, because as far as we're concerned, it would definitely be an easy sell. Talking to your admins, if they're supportive of you and they want to support your practice, this is not, this is something that they need to know about if they don't already. So, Dr. Scott, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your knowledge and expertise on the podcast today. On the webinar today. And we really wish you all the best with the campaign, and with you at the helm, I'm sure it will be an amazing success. And also people like Auntie Phyllis being there on the ground every day, helping these students. Absolutely amazing.
Yeah, thanks so much for the opportunity to share.
Okay, bye. And bye, everyone. Thanks for joining our webinar, and we will see you next time. Don't forget to sign that petition, linking it in the Facebook comments below and in the webinar notes, also in the show notes of the podcast. Thanks for joining us. Bye.